The timing is not a coincidence. At 11:23 a.m. Eastern Time, Donald Trump announced the United States was pausing planned strikes on Iranian energy infrastructure for 5 days to allow what he described as a final diplomatic window. At 11:47 a.m. Eastern Time, 24 minutes later, the Israeli Defense Forces confirmed new strikes on Tehran had been launched. 24 minutes. That gap between an American president announcing a diplomatic pause and Israel opening a new military operation is being read in Washington, Tehran, Beijing, and every capital, watching whether the United States and Israel are operating as a unified strategic actor or as two governments whose relationship is visibly fracturing under 26 days of war. Before we go deeper, hit the subscribe button right now and turn on notifications. What happened in those 24 minutes between Trump's pause announcement and Israel's new strike is the most important diplomatic and strategic story of this entire conflict. Subscribe now, I will wait. Trump's statement at 11:23 a.m. Eastern described a 5-day window for Iran to respond to what he called a final American proposal. The proposal's specific language has not been disclosed. The statement said the United States would not execute planned strikes on Iranian energy infrastructure during the window. It did not address Israeli operations. It did not call on Israel to pause. It was an American pause announced unilaterally without publicly coordinating Israel's posture. 24 minutes later, Israel announced new strikes on Tehran. Iranian state media confirmed impacts in 3 districts of the capital. Israel described the strikes as targeting command and control infrastructure. That is the verified baseline. The 24-minute gap is the document. Let me explain why. In modern U.S.-Israel military and diplomatic coordination, a presidential public statement of this magnitude would normally be preceded by bilateral consultation at the highest levels. The Israeli Prime Minister's office would know the statement was coming. The IDF would know a diplomatic window was being announced. They would calibrate their operational tempo accordingly. The fact that Israel launched new strikes on Tehran 24 minutes after Trump announced a pause tells you one of 3 things. Either Israel was not consulted about the pause announcement and chose to demonstrate that it operates independently of American diplomatic timelines, or Israel was consulted, rejected the pause framework, and chose to act before the window formally closed. Or Israel deliberately timed the strike to undercut the diplomatic credibility of Trump's pause by making it immediately visible to Iran and the world that America's closest ally was not observing the window Washington had just announced. All 3 interpretations lead to the same conclusion. The U.S.-Israel strategic alliance, the coordination architecture that has been the foundational assumption of every American policy calculation in this region for decades, is no longer functioning as a unified command. Dr. Martin Indyk, former U.S. Special Envoy for Israeli-Palestinian negotiations and former U.S. Ambassador to Israel, posted this morning on X with a precision that deserves quoting directly. He wrote that Israel's strike timing after Trump's pause announcement raises the fundamental question of whether the United States retains meaningful influence over Israeli military operations. That is not a partisan characterization. That is a former senior American diplomat using exact language to describe an exact situation. The United States announced a diplomatic window. Israel launched strikes into it. Whether Israel had the right to do so is a separate question from whether America's stated position has any operational meaning if its closest ally publicly disregards it within 24 minutes. Now, what nobody is covering with sufficient depth. Trump's 5-day pause announcement and Israel's immediate strike are not simply a coordination failure. They are competing strategic visions made visible simultaneously. Trump's vision, as expressed in the pause language, is a war that ends with Iran's capitulation to a specific demand set and American credit for the outcome. Israel's vision, as expressed in the continuous strike tempo, is a war that ends with Iran's military and governmental infrastructure so damaged that it cannot threaten Israel for a generation, regardless of any negotiated outcome. Those 2 visions are not compatible. A negotiated outcome that gives Trump a diplomatic victory requires Iran to have something left to negotiate with. An Israeli campaign designed to leave Iran with nothing to negotiate with prevents the diplomatic victory Trump is trying to construct. Every time Trump announces a diplomatic opening, Israel has a structural incentive to close it militarily before Iran can use it. And every time Israel closes it, Trump's leverage over Iran decreases Because Iran has no incentive to negotiate with a party that cannot deliver its allies compliance. Okay, I have to be fair. The other side has a point. First, the 24-minute gap does not definitively prove lack of coordination. Israeli strike packages are planned and authorized hours or days in advance. An operation that was already authorized and in motion before Trump's announcement may have been impossible to abort in that window without revealing operational information about the mission to Iranian intelligence through the abort process itself. Military operations have momentum that diplomatic announcements cannot always stop in real time. Second, Trump's pause announcement did not explicitly call on Israel to cease operations. It announced an American pause on American strikes on energy infrastructure. It is possible that the coordination model was deliberate division of labor, with America pausing on one category of targets while Israel continued on others. Third, Israel's stated target category, command and control infrastructure in Tehran, may have been specifically chosen to avoid the energy infrastructure that Trump's pause was designed to protect. The strike may represent compliance with the spirit of Trump's announcement rather than defiance of it. But here is where I have to be direct. Iran does not distinguish between American diplomatic windows and Israeli military operations. From Tehran's perspective, the party that is bombing its capital and the party that is offering a 5-day pause are part of the same coalition. If that coalition cannot coordinate its operational tempo with its own announced diplomatic timeline, Iran has no reason to believe the 5-day window represents a genuine offer rather than a tactical maneuver designed to produce a specific intelligence picture about Iranian decision-making. The diplomatic window is only credible if Iran believes that accepting it produces a genuine pause in military pressure. Israel's strike 24 minutes later tells Iran that the window produces no such pause, which means the window produces no diplomatic result, which means Trump's pause announcement achieved nothing except making the fracture in the U.S.-Israel alliance visible to every government on Earth at maximum resolution. Here is what you need to watch. Iran's response to the 5-day pause offer is the most critical near-term signal. If Iran publicly acknowledges the window and uses the language of the American proposal in its response, Iran is playing to the fracture, exploiting the visible gap between Washington and Tel Aviv to negotiate with America over Israel's head. If Iran ignores the window entirely and continues its missile campaign at current tempo, it has assessed the window as non-credible, which is the rational assessment given Israel's 24-minute timeline. Watch the White House response to Israel's strike. If the administration comments on it, the language will either paper over the fracture or acknowledge it. If the administration says nothing, the silence is the most significant diplomatic signal of the day. And watch Netanyahu's next public communication. If he addresses the timing directly, he is managing the optics of the fracture. If he says nothing, he is comfortable with the message the timing sent. Subscribe now, turn on notifications. When Iran's response to the 5-day window is issued, I will break down every word of it, because Iran's specific language will tell you whether it is playing to the fracture or ignoring the window entirely. When the White House characterizes Israel's timing, I will analyze every phrase. When Netanyahu speaks about those 24 minutes, I will cover it immediately. Trump announced a pause. Israel struck 24 minutes later. The alliance that was supposed to speak with one voice spoke with two, and the world heard both. Evidence first, analysis second. You decide what it means. This is day 26.